Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to discuss the Procurement Sharpe Ratio as described in our May letter and its cousin, the fiduciary rate. So CIOs with limited time and budget need a Procurement Sharpe Ratio to identify which critical suppliers are the most risk efficient. So the PSR, the Procurement Sharpe Ratio, describes an objective, risk-adjusted approach to ranking approximately similar suppliers, then sequencing the outliers for renegotiation or rationalization. First, some background. Traditional finance practitioners define the Sharpe ratio as the slope of the capital market line, for which William Sharpe shared a Nobel Prize with two others. For procurement, the analogous numerator is the deal's fixed cost, divided by an optimized conditional value at risk metric, or CVaR. It's an identical approach, except that the commercial agreements use a derived measure of risk. So here's the finance example, two different securities with a changing risk profile. See the blue versus the gold. But note the first segment here, the blue variance is less that of the gold, and it's the reverse in the second. For procurement, risk starts with the difference between scope, target, and actual grades across the entire scope of the deal. These grades are combined with other metrics such as weight and binding values, from which several different types of VAR metrics. In our implementation, optimized CVaR represents the expected average tail loss that can be thought of as an unfunded residual risk. So let's talk about risk types. Standard normal risks are described by the turquoise line and can be thought of as standard normal commercial variants or events that get handled in the normal course of business. Periodic QBRs or monthly operating SLAs is a good example. Fat tail risks are described by the red box and describe outlier events, i.e. commercial agreements that undergo stress for various reasons. The waterline is the phase transition point. It's a point of no return. So from a commercial perspective, the real work now is figuring out how commercial provisions should be structured to ensure the deal is survivable under stress. The term that's used is called a Lindy type provision. Excessively tough provisions will guarantee a breach. Bad deals always get broken. So let's look at the phase transition boundary, also called an incentive inversion point. The boundary marks the point at which the counterparty defection becomes economically rational. So because CVaR measures the unfunded tail exposure, a weak PSR versus its peer group shows that the deal is absorbing more risk than justified. It functions as a proximity sensor to the defection cliff. So good agentic reporting of weak assets will help triage work of remediation or rationalization. Finally, the ratio is a terrific tool to explain to counterparties why a specific clause change might be needed. So this is what happens at the phase transition point. Under normal conditions, issues get handled as they come up, the relationship works. However, when a deal is under stress, problems compound and the cross correlations between various deal elements approach one. Second, failure costs rarely stop at the supplier's liability cap and often fails to fully absorb exposure when the deal fails under stress. For example, unexpected refresh obligations, extended hypercare, sweep obligations, IP transition rights, or other discovered gaps. So the Lindy provisions, or inverted incentives, represent a force moving left, and excessively tough provisions will move you to the right. Pictorially, this describes the phase change. Okay, the work process. First, we start with an array of clause grades, weights, and binding values generated by our wargaming tool. See next month's letter. Those values get ported to an optimizer. The optimizer generates an optimal clause KPI exposure list, or a swap map of tradable opportunities. In this example, the optimal solution would be to offer the counterparty 21K worth of benefits based on relaxing a backup SLA requirement. And in exchange, we would ask for 17K worth of improved quantity flexibility provisions, say 17K worth of improved IP rights. So the optimized swap delivers two important benefits. First, obviously better insight than your counterparties of what the real value is. And perhaps more importantly, help your internal colleagues assess opportunities. For example, with the finance people who are always looking for 90-day terms, it would be easy to say, look, here's the value of what's available. If we lighten it to 45 days, is it really worth it? And the discussion changes into a metric-based review. Very helpful. So this is the heart of the matter, the computation of VAR and CVaR. First, The computation of these metrics are based on the outcome of the optimization, computing a 3x3 matrix of multiple VAR types, including CVaR, across 3 different states, the original, the optimized version, and the actual, because you're going to settle someplace different than the optimized version. Second, these metrics are used for the construction of the fiduciary rate cousin of the PSR. So this metric is intended for CFOs. It's designed to answer the single question that risk capital theory does not yet answer well. First, is the agreement accretive to the firm's weighted average cost of capital? In our view, this is an 85% accurate and 100% practical deal level approximation to enterprise-wide, cost of capital metrics. Where we stand, theoretical precision is less useful than a disciplined approximation that reveals the practical severity of exposure prior to signature. A deal can appear acceptable under conventional metrics while remaining deeply underwater because of limited visibility to how specific provisions impact tail risk. And we have discussions underway with several finance academics actually to talk about how to improve its approximation. Okay, our team. Russ is a world-class CPO, most recently from a Fortune 70 firm, and currently a board advisor to, as I understand, far too many startups. Mark is a world-class enterprise architect who reported to Filippo Passerini, president of P&G Procter & Gamble. He's very familiar with SAP and very difficult ERP-related issues. So I started life as a commodities trader, and I've had the honor of reporting to both of them in a variety of different assignments. Yes, we are growing and looking for appropriately qualified talent. So if you've stayed on this long, thank you. Please don't be shy. We'd be available for questions and or follow-ups. Thank you. Bye.